and we've been kind of seeing this play out here. Just kind of give me your take on what's been going on, what you've witnessed.
Mark. So, and we've been very closely monitoring the situation that's started here in Charlotte on Saturday morning. That was, ongoing through the week here, and then now on the way up to you all in Raleigh, passing through Cabarrus County, Concord area on their way up yesterday. We have seen Border Patrol operations that have been carried out in local shopping center parking lots. On Saturday, there was a U.S. citizen who was stopped not once but twice by two different groups of Border Patrol agents when he said, "Hey, you guys already recognize that I was a U.S. citizen." The first time they smashed his car window in order to fully get to him. Um, that obviously the damaged property is one thing, but just people are being completely snatched off of the streets, out of shopping plazas, off of job sites. They've essentially just gone to basically where the Supreme Court has said they can go, places where people who might be undocumented would ordinarily be. And so it's been a scary time for the community. I'm sure that you've seen the report that CMS put out that they had hundreds of thousands of students that did not come to school over the course of the last few days here. I'm sure that's not going to be any different in any of the other cities that are being affected by these operations. Um, but we also have employers that are relying on workers, and some of these workers that they've arrested and snatched up, first they disappear for 2 days. We can't figure out where they are. They don't show up in the ICE detainee locator sometimes for over 48 hours. Families are wondering what happened to their loved ones. And there have been I'd say a fair number of individuals that they have detained that have had lawful status of some kind. And so sorting out, these CBP officers are obviously not necessarily verifying status first and then taking an action. It's like, we'll take you first, we suspect, and then figuring it out. And sometimes, we heard a report of one individual, his boss went so far as to file a missing persons report for him because he was missing for a little while. And then it turned out that he was in lawful status. And so they did end up letting him out from Georgia without any further action, but it's terrorizing communities. Children are afraid. Um, and it's really weakening the social systems that I see it, at least here in our city of Charlotte. But I see that effect moving up to wherever those operations are next over in Raleigh. And then I hear that by the end of the week, they might be out in the Asheville area.
I can imagine that having Border Patrol on the ground changes how you advise some of your clients. What do you tell them? And specifically, if you can touch on, if you're telling them to have certain documents on them, what does that look like?
Sure. So the first thing that I say for all of my clients, especially those that have work permits, authorization to be here, lawful status, is, keep those documents with you. Please don't leave them at home. It is important to have that. I mean, even if you're a U.S. citizen, it's important to have your U.S. passport on you to be able to show that just in case you are in the wrong place at the wrong time. Those individuals that might be in the process of fixing their status is another sort of complicated gray area on how to advise, because on one hand, I want to tell them, bring your receipts, bring copies of the documents to show that you're working on your status, you're working through these issues. And a lot of times these processes take many years. And so they have these documents, but at the end of the day, I can't even promise them that CBP would respect the fact that that person does have their status in flux and in process. And so it's a difficult and challenging time also to be advising people, because what once I would tell them is not going to be an issue, don't worry about it, bring your receipts and you'll be fine. I can't necessarily guarantee that that's going to be the case.
Is there any advice you can share for someone who, may be approached by an immigration agent? How should they approach that conversation from your perspective?
So I think the problem has really been that the approach on the other side has been a more aggressive one than I think what people are used to when ICE is out doing its normal operations. And so to de-escalate the situation, an individual who is fully documented, either a permanent resident or a U.S. citizen, or whatever other status you might have, say very clearly, I am a permanent resident, I am a U.S. citizen. And then the question that would be asked next is, am I under arrest? Am I free to leave? If the answer is no, or there's no response and you're being detained, then, ask for an attorney, because there is still that right to an attorney, although that has been significantly curtailed just by the procedures that they have in place. Attorneys are not really being given very much access to the local ICE office, but at least to know where you are. An attorney would be able, if you call us, we can call your family. There's things that we can try to do, at least to keep tabs on where you are, or even to provide the documents necessary to clear up whatever misunderstanding might be going on.
This is a question I'm assuming you may not know the answer to, but do you have any idea where these people who are being detained are held?
We know that their first stopping point is typically the Charlotte ICE office on Tyvola Center Drive. That's been generally sort of like the staging location. And I'd like to kind of shed some light on that as well, that we're not talking about like a jail facility where there are cells and restrooms and, showers and places where people would generally be able to take care of themselves as if they were going to be held there for over 24 hours. I mean, it's basically an office building. So they go in, they're being processed, and then there are buses daily that are taking these individuals out of state. North Carolina, South Carolina do not have any ICE detention centers specifically. Alamance County does hold some ICE detainees, usually those who are transferred from a criminal facility over to another North Carolina facility and held until they can get ICE to come get them. But that's not what's being done right now. The most of the people that are being detained after spending their time in Charlotte and being processed there, they're being sent down to detention centers in Georgia. There are 3 that are there. So Stewart Detention Center, Folkston ICE Processing Center, and Irwin County Detention Center. And then we've also heard reports that those centers are filling up, and that even at least in Stewart, they're saying that some individuals are having to sleep on the floor because they don't have enough bed space. And so there are some people we have heard that are going to be started to be transported down to the Louisiana area, where there are a few detention centers as well.
Something that I heard you say a moment ago was, there is this kind of gray area for a lot of people. I mean, it seems like, no one who is trying to gain citizenship has a story that is the same, right? There's people on work visas, there's people who had TPS protections, different things like that. And I feel like in my reporting, one of the challenges I've had is trying to understand how every situation is unique. Can you kind of speak to that? How even it seems like as an immigration attorney that it can be a challenge to advise people because there are so many different types of statuses out there. Can you help me kind of put that into words?
So when we're doing intake, and I will say also plug for Carolina Migrant Network, they are doing some amazing work. They have hotlines for reporting CBP and ICE presence in the community, as well as a triage line for detainees. But if I get a call, if CMN gets a call, generally we're asking some very basic questions. So name, date of birth, country of birth, so that we can try and locate the person in the ICE locator. And then the last known status of that person. So how did they enter originally? How long ago? And then the complexities really come out when people will say to us, or family members or a boss, he had a work permit, he had a work visa. And that means different things. A work permit could be based on a pending asylum claim. A work permit could be based on a pending U visa. Maybe even an individual who was paroled in for purposes of another ancillary benefit. They were allowed to enter into the United States and then maybe granted deferred action. That's another one. DACA is another type of deferred action, even though it's the same statute. It's very different. And so it's the complexities really, and the challenges are talking with lay people and trying to get their understanding of what the status is, and maybe not having the documents because they're with the person who is detained, who we can't necessarily get to, and sorting through all of those nuances, because there are just so many different ways that we could see people entering, or being in status right now, and maybe they entered lawfully, maybe they have a green card application that's pending but it hasn't been adjudicated yet. And ICE treats all of those people slightly differently. But CBP seems to say no status, or even if you have a work permit, sometimes we're not going to respect that. We're going to sort it out and figure it out somewhere else.
That kind of leads me to my next question. I've been in contact since we covered the end of TPS protections and those letters from the Department of Homeland Security with a number of people from Afghanistan. And we spoke to one this morning, completely anonymously, who, felt like he was really struggling to understand the gray area that he is in, which is essentially that, from my understanding, he came here seeking asylum, got a work visa and was here legally, but then received that letter saying that his protections were taken away. I know that it's hard to speak to like his specific case and no case is the same, but what is your understanding specifically from people seeking asylum coming from Afghanistan, where they stand given that letter being sent out? I honestly am just confused here.
Sure. So I think what you're talking about is the termination of pretty much all of the humanitarian parole programs. And so that affected Afghanistan as a big one. But then we also had Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, Venezuelan parole programs, where individuals were given a 2-year period to enter the United States lawfully, have work authorization, and figure out what they were going to do. And so, the large majority of those people had valid asylum claims. And so they filed those in accordance with the proper procedures, and those remain pending with USCIS. The trick is that if you no longer have parole, having an asylum application pending is not really a status technically. It's protection against unlawful presence, but it's not a valid status, even though you have a work authorization card. And what we've seen is that the Department of Homeland Security's argument is that, well, you could continue to receive your asylum and fight for your asylum while detained or while in removal proceedings. And so that's been their sort of cornerstone of this, is that, well, basically, we don't care that we granted you work authorization. We don't care that you filed your application timely. We don't care that you entered through a valid parole program. That's been revoked, and we'll let the courts sort it out in a detained proceeding setting. And that's really put a lot of pressure on the immigration court system as well. That, coupled with some of the new case law that prevents people from receiving bonds who were not lawfully admitted in some non-immigrant status. There's an argument that the department has made and that the Board of Immigration Appeals has formalized, basically saying that those individuals who are seeking admission still, meaning they haven't been admitted formally in a status, those individuals are not eligible for bond. They're considered mandatory detention. And so we've had to then turn to the federal court system to correct that error and, correct those and get people bond proceedings. But it's taking longer. It's burdening all the court systems. And it's not in keeping with the spirit of what these protections were meant to do and these processes and how they were meant to be followed from the very beginning.
For someone who's in a situation like that one, I've been hearing from people, we're staying home, we're getting our groceries delivered, we're not going to work, which means they're not getting a paycheck. How are you advising people? I mean, whether they're, documented or not, regardless of status, if they're just feeling those nerves, and probably rightfully so, because we've seen Border Patrol agents taking people who are documented into custody. How do you advise people?
Comes down to risk tolerance, unfortunately. If you've got a family to feed and this is the only way that you get your paycheck, and you know that you're doing everything right and trying to follow the laws as best as possible, then you make that decision and go out for your family. Maybe if you don't have to go out that day, or if the work is slow, or there's some other way to work, whether it be remotely. Not everybody has the luxury of being able to do that. But, a lot of the people that I'm speaking with, we are counseling them to do what's best for them and for their families at the end of the day. There is a real risk that regardless of your status, that you could be detained for either a short or a long period of time. And that's a lot of stress and anxiety. And it breaks my heart really to talk to these families of people that have truly tried to do things the right way, but still I can't guarantee them, like I said, earlier in our conversation, I can't guarantee them that they'll be totally fine. And so it just has to be an individual assessment of what's my risk tolerance, am I okay, and how much do I need to go out of the house.
Wow. For kind of a final wrap up, and then I'll let you go. One thing I keep hearing is from kind of the other side of things, when people say things like, people need to come here the right way. They need to be here the right way. They needed to follow the rules. I guess my question is, A, kind of what is your response to those people? And then what does it look like to come here the right way? And why is sometimes that a challenge?
A lot of the people that are getting detained did come here the right way and they did follow the rules and they did everything that they were supposed to do. And yet they're still getting picked up. And that I think at the heart of it is really where, from my perspective, lies the inhumanity. Um, I should not have to advise people that, oh yeah, you have a work permit, you've done things the right way, but you still might not be safe. I shouldn't have to say that. And I think that really our local ICE officers and they're parts of these local communities and they know and they understand. But I think the difference with CBP coming in is that they have a totally different mindset. Anyone and anything that has any kind of, working through or shadow through, going through things is that those people are going to be in danger. And I think that I fully agree with the rule of law. I know the procedures. I know that it takes years sometimes for people to be able to do things, quote unquote, the right way. But there are also programs out there that allow those people the opportunity to come. And whether you agreed with those programs or not, the programs existed, and these individuals came to the United States through lawful processes where their biometrics were captured, where they were background checked, where everything was done in accordance with the law. And to change that and rip the rug out from underneath people, that is where, again, the inhumanity lies.
Very well said. I think that is all that I need from you. Is there anything while we're still recording that you'd like to get out there?
No, just I don't know if you have it, or I'll send it to you if you don't. But Carolina Migrant Network is doing some amazing things. They are a local Charlotte organization, but they are trying to mobilize their services throughout the entire state, and they are taking the lead. They are one of the few legal services. There are some others, but they're one of the largest, at least, that do removal defense. And they're taking the lead on habeas referrals. So people that need those federal court complaints in order to be able to get out on bond and fight their cases through the court system the way they should be able to. Um, they are currently also, they have a fundraising campaign that they're currently doing. There's a very generous donor who's going to match up to $20,000 of donations between now and Sunday. And I just, if it's possible to get that information out there, the work that they're doing is really spectacular. I'm part of their network. We've taken on a couple of pro bono cases, and I just think the public needs to know that if they don't know where to support, they don't want to be the ladies on the corners blowing whistles. Then maybe they could give of their money as well in order to help with the defense of these individuals who are unjustly detained.
Absolutely. I will make sure to work that into our web story. I'm going to hit stop
Thank you.
recording, and then I have one